the penny has just dropped. The average Trump supporter, the average MAGA person, isn't really ever going to see what goes on a Sunday in terms of cable news unless it's on Fox News. They won't really understand that Hunter Biden is a non-entity. They probably do not realise that, just let's compare the Trump swamp tree there and Hunter Biden. Now, of course, the main witness of the Hunter while he's been arrested by the FBI, doesn't mean to say that, Trumpy Trumps are not trying to find a way to get out of the hole they're in. To me, case collapsed.
A former FBI informant has been charged with lying about Joe and Hunter Biden seeking millions of dollars in bribes from a Ukrainian company, allegations that are really central to the Republicans' effort to impeach the president. Now, you voted to support this impeachment inquiry. Do you think it's responsible to continue this inquiry given these charges against this FBI informant?
Absolutely. I mean, this inquiry, and it is an inquiry, is based upon actual bank records, documents, transactions of money, large sums of money. And doing an inquiry as to, how these funds got to the Biden family from international sources, China, Russia, Ukraine. That is certainly an issue that Congress needs to take up, and I think the investigation will continue.
But Judiciary Committee Chairman Jim Jordan said just a few weeks ago that the most corroborating evidence comes from this informant's allegations, and they are at the heart of the impeachment case. Even before that, Senator Lindsey Graham said to me, there's no smoking gun. So can you justify continuing with this impeachment inquiry?
I think you have to continue until it reaches its natural conclusion. But I'm not surprised at all that a business associate and associate of the Biden family might be untruthful. But we'll just have to continue to see what the bank records, the transactions tell, how that story unfolds. And I believe that Chairman Comer's doing a great job in this.
Just to be clear, he was an FBI informant, not necessarily an associate. I do want to turn.
We've conducted this investigation for over a year. We've been very transparent with the American people. We've been very transparent with the media. We've published 4 substantive bank memorandums that show concerning transactions from our enemies around the world. We've referenced several hundreds of suspicious activity reports that the banks filed, very concerned about suspicious activity by the Biden family. We've heard testimony from IRS whistleblowers.
Sunday delivers with the C word. No, not C for Cheney. What C word would you use to describe Speaker Johnson? Go on, scream at me a C word. Not that one.
Pay a $355 million fine for fraud. This on top of $83 million that he's been ordered to pay to E. Jean Carroll, the writer who's accused him of sexual assault. He has to pay that for defamation. And we're just getting started with the court cases here. There's a lot more to come.
Yeah, I mean, look, there are so many pieces to this. I think with respect to E. Jean Carroll, people need to understand, and I think they ought to be asked, people who are supporting Donald Trump, what the jury found in that case is that, Donald Trump was guilty of committing sexual assault. Basically, that he actually had done what he said on the Access Hollywood tape he did. I mean, this is not something that's out of left field. And when you look at these cases and you look at the verdicts and the judgments, it's clear the common thread that runs through all of them is Donald Trump lack of willingness to abide by the law, lack of commitment to the truth, fundamental lack of character. And I think one of the things that is so troubling about this political season is the extent to which you've got, people that used to be good and honorable members of Congress, for example, who have simply apparently abandoned the need to actually elect people of character and honor, and instead are embracing him.
It's been made clear to Speaker Johnson that if he does that, he brings up this bill and just allows it to be voted on, even if he votes against it. If he just introduces the bill that, as you know, had already passed the Senate, there will be repercussions for his speakership, that members of the House Freedom Caucus may offer a motion to vacate and remove him from his speakership. That is the threat facing him.
That's right. And what I would say to that is, he ought to understand that it is worth it if he has to lose his speakership in order to make sure that freedom survives, in order to make sure that the United States of America continues to play its leadership role in the world. He ought to read what's happening in Ukraine today. He ought to read about the slaughter that's going on. And he ought to understand that we are at a turning point in the history, not just of this nation, but of the world. And again, he's going to have to explain to future generations, to his kids, to his grandkids, whether or not he did what was right, whether or not he was a force for good and aided the cause of freedom, or whether he continued down this path of cowardice and doing what Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin want him to do.
I got to say, for a man who's recently got engaged, he seems to be spending an awful lot of time doing anything apart from being seen and hanging out with his fiancée. I mean, this is a person who told the world about his engagement less than 21 days ago, and chose to spend Valentine's Day with, not with his fiancée. And this Sunday, he's just been continuing to pour out his love for, Lumpy.
When it comes to former President Trump, Senator Scott, do you believe the RNC, the Republican National Committee, should be involved in paying his legal expenses, which are mounting?
I can only tell you that without any question, when you look at the two-tier justice system that we have that I just reinforced, I think it's important for us to note that without any question, the American people are very concerned about how that would impact their lives. Their issues are very clear, by the way. The American people are more focused on their future than Donald Trump's past. What they're more focused on is making sure that our southern border is secured. We're looking at almost 10 million illegal crossings by the election. The American people aren't asking the questions about legal challenges. The American people are asking questions about economic challenges. They're not talking about legal challenges. They're talking about their challenges across a kitchen table.
And you were there, but I don't understand how you can criticize President Biden for dragging his feet when it comes to helping Ukraine, when Donald Trump is out there saying that the United States shouldn't be giving any money to Ukraine, and he set out alarm bells throughout NATO countries when he talked about Russia doing whatever the hell it wants to do to countries that don't pay enough. Let's talk about what Russia's doing right now, because the key city of Avdiivka fell to Russian forces yesterday in a major setback for Ukraine. President Zelensky blamed the loss on the artificial deficit of arms and ammunition because of Western inaction. He pleaded for Congress to act. You said after Hamas attacked Israel, you said President Biden had blood on his hands because he hadn't confronted Iran more aggressively, and Iran supports Hamas. If the U.S. fails to support Ukraine right now in the fight against Russia, will Congress have blood on its hands?
Well, we've already supported Ukraine for over $100 billion. And when I said that Joe Biden dragged his feet getting into this conflict at the beginning, I meant that. Look at the fact that we followed Germany. We followed Germany to help to help Ukraine, not a NATO ally, but to help Ukraine. That is a really important first step that set us back by months. What we've been doing since then is playing catch up. That's one of the reasons why Congress has appropriated over $100 billion. Even President Donald Trump has said a loan to Ukraine would actually provide more resources.
Before you go, though, there's a lot of tension, obviously, between President Trump and Governor Haley. That makes sense as they're headed to the showdown in South Carolina. But he says things like she may not be eligible to run, suggesting she wasn't born in the U.S., which she was. He calls her bird brain. He made comments about her husband being on military deployment as if he was trying to get away from her. Wall Street Journal says this: he seems to have forgotten, if he ever cared, that he will need some of her admirers to vote for him in November, talking about centrist Republicans, independents, even Democrats who voted for her. Is President Trump writing them off? Where does he think her supporters will go if he continues to attack her like that?
Well, there's no doubt that the race has gotten kind of challenging without any question. Listen, the rhetoric coming out of the Haley camp, talking about people's age. We see the Haley camp and the family referring to me as Judas Iscariot. We're hearing a lot of chatter out of the Haley camp, not only just matching the rhetoric from the Trump side, but actually going further. Why? Because they're desperate. Here's what I
think here, speaking of name calling, you say focus on the issues. Should former President Trump stop calling Ambassador Haley bird brain?
Well, I think her son should stop calling me Judas Iscariot. So there's lots of things that we can talk about, but let's just keep our focus on the American people and why it's so important for us to, as elected officials, to focus on their issues. One of the deals
it had $650 million for it had $650 million for additional funding for a wall.
$650 million when the President of the United States is selling off the construction material for the wall? Come on, Jake. Let's get serious about protecting America so that we can actually help defend the rest of the world when we find it appropriate. We cannot forget America's #1 national security issue is, in fact, securing our southern border.
Well, so is the Border Patrol wrong?
Finish that wall. The Border Patrol agents, I'm telling you what the Border Patrol agents told me when I was literally in Eagle Pass, Texas on Friday. Yes, they were right to ask for a bigger wall. Yes, they were right to want us to take some of the resources, as I put in legislation, from the IRS and take $40 billion and give it to the Border Patrol agents so that they can double the number of agents, so that they have more resources for overtime.
Your fellow vice presidential hopefuls, Elise Stefanik and J.D. Vance, have both said that they would not have certified Joe Biden's electoral college victory if they had been vice president on January 6, 2021, if they had been in Mike Pence's place. Would you have?
I'm not going to answer hypothetical questions, number one, and I didn't know that I was a vice president hopeful. Thank you very much, Jake, for letting me know where I am on the scale. I'll simply say this, that having 4 more years of President Donald Trump means that we'll have low inflation, low crime, we'll have record low unemployment. We saw that happen for the first time, African Americans seeing unemployment under 6%, Hispanics for the first time under 5%, Asians under 3%, the majority population a 50-year low, women a 70-year low. What I'm actually more interested in is not my future, the future of America.
There is one question that does need to be asked. Let's suppose that Nikki Haley doesn't get the nominee to be the Republican nominee to be president. What does she do next? She said today, let me check the date, I think it's Sunday the 16th, so it's the 18th. She said today, Sunday the 18th of February, if Trump is nominated leader of the Republican Party, he will not win, the Republicans won't win the presidency. So let's say he does get the nomination. What does she say and what does she do? Bearing in mind, supposedly, she signed this contract to support whoever the Republican nominee is. To me, the Democrats now should just be collecting all of this material of Nikki Haley and getting ready to roll it on billboards, roll it on commercials, roll it on the radio, roll it on anywhere that has visual or audio content.
We are going to have a female president of the United States. It will either be me or it will be Kamala Harris. And if Donald Trump is the nominee for the Republican Party, he will not win. Every poll shows that. He will not win. And we will have a President Kamala Harris. I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm not stopping. I'm not going anywhere. We're going to do this for the long haul, and we're going to finish it.
Does that mean you will not support him if he's the Republican nominee?
That means I'm going to run and I'm going to win. And y'all can talk about support later. Right now, you can ask him if he's going to support me when I'm the nominee.
Do you think he would?
Do you think he would? I highly doubt it.
All right. Nikki Haley, thank you very much for joining us. We appreciate it. What would you be doing if you were president right now? How would you make Putin pay for this?
I think it's important to stand with the Russian people who believe Navalny was really talking for them. I mean, you look at this hero, he was fighting corruption, he was fighting what Putin does, and what did Putin do? He killed him, just like he does all his political opponents, and I think that's very telling. But this goes back to the fact that we need to remind the American people that Vladimir Putin is not our friend. Vladimir Putin is not cool. This is not someone we want to associate with. This is not someone that we want to be friends with. This is not someone that we can trust. And so when you hear Donald Trump say in South Carolina a week ago that he would encourage Putin to invade our allies if they weren't pulling their weight, that's bone-chilling, because all he did in that one moment was empower Putin. And all he did in that moment was he sided with a guy that kills his political opponents. He sided with a thug that arrests American journalists and holds them hostage. And he sided with a guy who wanted to make a point to the Russian people, don't challenge me in the next election or this will happen to you too. We have to start waking up to what this means, and that's why the importance of making sure that Ukraine wins is clear, because we have to prevent further war. And right now, Putin is feeling more emboldened than he ever has.
Voice. I think this really is going to be election, yes, where Joe Biden and Donald Trump are the candidates, but really where it is going to be a question for every single American about what kind of country do we want to build. On the one hand, we've got an agent of total chaos, someone who wants to restrict our freedom, and someone who puts himself first, and that is Donald Trump. I mean, consider this. Remember what it was like when Donald Trump was president. He was in our faces and in our living room every day injecting chaos. Think about what will happen here in Pennsylvania if he gets his way and he does away with Obamacare, something he's pledged to do. That means 1.2 million Pennsylvanians won't have health insurance. Think about if he gets his way with a national ban on abortion. This guy is trying to take away the freedom of millions of women across this country. We've already seen what he's tried to do when people go and vote and choose someone other than him. He tries to overthrow the government. This is a guy who is an agent of chaos, who's trying to restrict our freedom. And every American's going to have to stand up and be counted as to whether or not they want to continue to be a voice of freedom and democracy, that this is going to be a beacon of hope to countries around the world. And so in many ways, this election is less about Joe Biden and Donald Trump and more about us and the kind of country that we want to build. And I've got confidence in the American people that just as they did in 2020, they will rise up, they will demand more, they will seek justice, and they will look to defend freedom in this nation, and they will reject Donald Trump. Working. And I think it's important to go back and look at the history of Pennsylvania in recent years. There have been a number of races. You cited mine where we won by an historic margin, where the pundits a year out were saying it's going to be a bad year for Democrats. What we have seen really since Donald Trump's election here in 2016 is every other time Pennsylvanians have had the opportunity to go to the ballot, they have voted for freedom and against extremism. They rejected Donald Trump in 2020. They voted for me by an historic margin in 2022. Just last year in 2023, we had a Supreme Court race that was largely focused on freedom and the right to choose, and we elected the Democrat. In 2023, we threw out all kinds of school board members who were focused on banning books, not focused on our children. In numerous special elections here in our state legislature, including one last week, we rejected extremism and focused on fighting for freedom. So when Pennsylvanians get the opportunity to go to the polls, they vote for freedom, they reject extremism, and I'm going to do everything in my political power over the course of the next several months to make the case, to prosecute the case against Donald Trump, to make the case about how Joe Biden is the candidate standing up for our freedom, and I'm hopeful that the good people of Pennsylvania will continue with that string of voting for freedom and against extremism.
In the New York Times.